All right, let's get started. Welcome to the September 2023 OpenZFS leadership meeting. It looks like we're pretty late on the agenda today, at least in the doc. So I'll just mention briefly the OpenZFS Developer Summit is going to be held in October, pretty soon now. So not too far off. I've received the talk submissions. We'll be getting it back to the speakers. Should be by the end of the week. If you forgot about that, then email and wanted to give a talk, then let me know as soon as possible. Yeah, so we'll be announcing the talks next week, and I think we'll have some great talks for folks. Registration is open, and it'll be held in person in San Francisco again this year. Any questions about the conference? All right, then I'll open the floor to other topics of discussion. I'm going to see that Brian and Tony are both, Brian and Tony are both here. If anybody has questions about the upcoming releases, schedules, they'd be good folks to answer it.
And Matt, I can give an update on the RAID Z expansion feature.
Sure, go ahead.
First, I want to thank you for providing the code walkthrough last week, and I'm looking forward to getting feedback from both Mark and Brian. And it's been rebased. I rebased it yesterday. It's looking good. So just kind of after we get some feedback, I think it'll be good to go. I did note that the FreeBSD build bot is failing again in the configuration phase, unrelated to my changes. So I don't know what that's about, but I was hoping to get a run on that because I shortened the test time for the ZFS test suite because they were timing out on FreeBSD. So hopefully with the new versions, they'll get to that when it gets to that point in the test.
Yeah, we should take a look and see if it's failing for an existing reason or something with your PR. I don't know. Did you get a chance to look and see? Is it
it's
config or not?
It's config files that have nothing to do with my changes.
Okay.
So it can't find a config file, and it's not happy. So
something unrelated then.
Yeah. But my change should address the failures that we were seeing in the test suite.
Well, I can talk a little bit about the upcoming 2.2 release. So we've put together now 4 RCs for that have been released. The last RC was cut last week. That's hopefully close to the final RC. Things are looking pretty good there. There may be some additional patches we end up pulling in, but hopefully not too many. And we're looking to cut a release for that, our final release for that in the next couple of weeks. So look for that.
So maybe we'll have a release before the conference.
That is absolutely the plan. Yes.
Wow. So this could be very exciting timing with the release and release and then RAID Z expansion going into the main branch right before the conference. The exciting new stuff to talk about.
And there's a ton of good stuff that's been cooking in the master branch. It'll be in the 2.2 release. That's been there for a while, right? There's been a ton of great work done there. So it'll be nice to get that released for folks.
Cool.
Partially related to release, I mentioned it last week on other call. FreeBSD 14 branch was branched recently, and it was updated also to follow ZFS 2.2 branch. Pretty quickly, several people who doing massive package builds found several issues. A couple were probably mine in ZIL. My work, those should be fixed now. No, fixed as far as I know. and those working okay. Was also a report for block cloning. Was also hit problem. It's also already patched, and so far goes okay. There was just today or yesterday was one more complaint, something about unmounting file system. So it's some other issue, but hard to say whether it's 2.2 or something OS or what's that. But that's only one report. Otherwise, yeah, we are better now than we were a few weeks ago.
Great to hear. I know we've systematically been cherry picking things back into the RC for issues that we've seen. So it's been stabilizing.
No,
sounds like.
Oh yeah, there is one more report specifically somehow happening only on Amazon EC2 with pre-made images of FreeBSD. And happens only with ZFS. It looks like some memory corruption, but everywhere immediately on boot pretty quickly and nowhere else. But I saw only back traces. I don't know what to blame and how can it be specific to EC2 and nothing else. That's I have no explanation so far. I don't have EC2 instance to try to look on that. So that's all I have for now out of known issues. Hopefully it's not ZFS.
Cool. Other topics, questions?
I invited today Ed Nadolsky, my colleague from AX Systems, who's working on parallel sync implementation just to improve it, to not sync too much, but also not sync too little. And it's also related to allocators, multiple allocators of ZFS to address a few issues. So I'd like Ed to bring some attention to his work because it's definitely interesting, I think, and would benefit from some eyes on it.
Yeah,
It's already open.
I just wanted to put in a plug to see if anybody might have a chance to look over the PR. Like Matt was saying, we just like to get some more eyes on that, and I'm happy to go over that in more detail, either here or offline, whatever you like.
Yeah. So this is you're syncing, you're like in SPA sync, you're syncing a bunch of data sets in parallel. Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Kind of sounds kind of
Or
similar
portions of a data set if it has you know multiple D nodes. So it'll branch through. Like if you have a data set for zvol, it won't serialize on that one. It'll also start the next one if it has additional threads available.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, it sounds kind of related to the work that I did a little quite a while back to have it like within a data set, the dnodes get synced in parallel. But this is kind of extending that to work across multiple data sets. So that's cool. Yeah, I might be able to take a look at that. And then you said, how does it relate to the allocators?
So a couple other parts of that change are to basically increase the number of write issue task queues to match the number of allocators. And so the idea of those changes is, and also to match the number of sync threads. So the idea of all those changes is to reduce the lock contention that can occur in a given allocator, as that's been shown to be sort of a bottleneck during sync.
So is that like effectively reducing the number of write issue threads to like the number of allocators is normally 4, is that right?
Right, 4. So it's creating currently 4 sync threads, and then it's increased the number of write issue task queues for the standard priority from 1 in the ordinary case to match the number of allocators. So it's increasing the parallelism at that point too.
Okay, cool. Makes sense.
I can. Rob Norris from my team will find some time to look at those changes. I know he'd looked at Alexander's ZIL V2 or whatever it was called from last month, and he's been doing a bunch of work on our side on some ZIL related stuff. So he's got a lot of context that he can apply to your review.
Great, thank you. That was all I was interested in covering. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Ed. Other topics or questions?
If there's no one else, I have a laundry list.
Sure, go ahead, Alan.
So first up is the work on Dedup. Rob and I've been applying some of what you talked about last month, Matt. Basically having the concept we have right now is there are 2 AVL trees, basically an active one and a syncing one. And so we'll accumulate log entries that we've logged to the DDT and keep that AVL sorted by hash order. And then once it reaches something like 50% of the amount of memory we want to spend on the dedupe log, then we will switch that one to the syncing one and make a fresh one active to start taking any new writes. And we can start flushing out those log entries in hash order to the ZAP so that we're getting the maximum amortization, but being able to append to the log kind of checkpoints of, we got up to this hash walking through that AVL. And eventually, once we get to the end, then we can free that AVL and truncate that log and move on to the next one, and be able to do that in a way where we can solve the problem we had with the previous design about how do we kind of checkpoint and sync not an entire shard of the AVL at once. And so this way allows us to be more incremental without having to reapply the log in a kind of odd order, and focus on, like you mentioned, having it in hash order so that we're maximizing the amortization of the rights to the indirect blocks and so on in the ZAP. Rob, did you have any more to add about just maybe some flavor on what you've been doing there?
I don't think so on what we've done. That's a pretty tight description. I have some questions, like I would appreciate some ideas on how to do a couple of things, but I'll give anyone a chance to speak to what you just said first.
Sounds good.
Yeah. The thing we've been looking at a bit is basically when to actually do these things, like when to swap the syncing list to be the flushing list, or tree or log, or there's too many words in there, which for the most part right now is just sort of based on size, and if we haven't done it for a while, it's not fully fleshed out. But the real thing I was trying to figure out during this week was for how much to flush each transaction. We initially thought to do something a bit like what Scrub and Resilver and other scans do, where they say, this is the amount of time we can spend. But those things have the advantage that they do their own IO. So they can, and they, have a little carve out on the sync thread to be able to take some of that time. Whereas here we're just writing to zaps, so we're writing to DMU objects. So obviously, the actual calls to zap update or whatever are instant because they're all memory backed, and we're a long way away from when the IO is actually done, and that IO is just mixed up in everything else. So and also one zap update at the top or n zap updates at the top does not necessarily correspond to some amount of IO. So like it's kind of hard to see. So the ideas we sort of had were we could time, how we could attach like timestamps to like how long it takes to write a single D node out kind of thing, and then look at that and adjust how much we're putting in and out, each transaction until we find a sort of a nice point, or it's all action at a distance. And I haven't really had a great idea. I've done some experiments, but I haven't really had a great idea that I like that isn't a lot of threading stuff up and down the stack. So I'm just curious if anyone has a particular thought about that, or another really great strategy for, you know, how to decide how much to ship out at a time.
So you're doing the Zap updates from syncing context, is that right?
That's right.
So yeah, I definitely hear the difficulty of like you're creating work that will be done later, and you don't know when to stop adding more work onto the pile. Um, I would think so. Two ideas. One is there is some like incoming rate of adding more entries to the list of things that you need to sync out eventually, right?
Hmm.
And you're kind of choosing how much to do this TXG. So you could just kind of follow that. So say we're going to use whatever. We're going to use a gigabyte of RAM for this. That translates to X number of entries. That's like 1 million entries in our AVL tree. Yeah, we're like populating some new AVL tree. We're syncing out the old AVL tree, but we only need to sync out some of it, this TXG, not the whole thing. So you could look at it and say like, okay, well, what's the sum of the number of entries in my tree plus the live one? However much over 1 million that is, that's what I'm going to sync. And so it's like, well, we let ourselves get over 1 million by like 1 TXG's worth or whatever. And that would kind of naturally throttle it, right? Because you're creating work, and then when you actually do those IOs, that's going to like slow down whatever it is that's causing like more changes to be accumulated, right? If you can get something along those lines to work, I think that would be probably the best. And you can have on top of that some kind of minimum thing where it's like, if the workload is low, then we don't need to really use up the whole gig of RAM. Just like always push out like 1,000 or 10,000, some constant where you're just like every TXT we push out like 10,000 of these things because we know that's like not a significant amount of IO. Yeah, so that would probably be the best approach, assuming that it kind of works out. The other thing that you could look at doing is, because you're doing you're doing the Zap updates and the actual writes, like syncing out that D node in syncing context. So I think there's nothing that would prevent you from like making some Zap updates and then like calling dnode sync and then like making some more Zap updates and calling dnode sync again within the same transaction group. So you could do something like that where you're like, well, like do 10,000 Zap updates and then do this sync and then do the 10,000 updates and then the sync and keep doing that until I've done it for like 5 seconds or whatever. That would let you get kind of a similar behavior to the like time carve out that the scrubbing does. But I don't really love that. Like, I think that would be acceptable, but it's not like great. Like I wouldn't say that the time carve out thing of the scrubbing is really great either. And there's a similar kind of thing for like background freeing that's like carves out 1 second or whatever. None of those mechanisms are really good. They're just kind of good enough.
That one's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, the min max memory, and sort of just having just monitoring the interest rate and that sort of thing was
Yeah,
a
making
thing we
sure
were
we're
sort of
doing enough to keep up with the incoming rate, but also having a floor so that, if the system's idle, we're still
yeah,
cleaning up, because we do want to keep the logs relatively small since they have an impact on import time.
yeah. So that one will be in there somewhere, I reckon, because it's not hard to do. Calling denote sync directly, that's really interesting. Um, I
Yeah,
will
I
enjoy
haven't
playing
looked
with
at
that.
like the code to see, how that will actually pan out, but
Yeah,
it seems theoretically possible at least.
Mhm.
yeah. All right. Interesting. Anyway, I don't thank you for that. They're good suggestions. I don't have anything specific, Alan. If you think of a particular
Nope,
thing,
I
I'm
think that
happy to
was,
speak to it. But
no, I
no,
think that
that's good.
was
That's the
the main
the
part for that.
puzzle of the week.
Yep. And then Don's been looking into the issue you raised last month, Matt, about doing dedupe prune, where we're going to delete some entries from the unique zap. And there was concern that that would result in them not getting scrubbed because the scrub
Mm-hmm.
tries to avoid reading blocks that have multiple entries. But Don, do you want to share a little bit about what you found?
Yeah, it looks like during a scrub, there's a DSL scan DT, DDT that scans the duplicate box. It ignores the unique ones, and then in the top down, we have this function called class contains, and it says, does the duplicate class contain this block? And if it
Oh,
does, then it skips it.
okay.
So the unique blocks are not considered in terms of DDT
Okay. I
with
didn't
respect
realize
to
that
the
it was actually
scan.
checking in the dedupe table when it was traversing the tree to see if it should do it or not.
Yeah, it calls this
Right.
class contains. And then as far as you brought up that, what about transitioning blocks? So when a block transitions in line, like as it's transitioning, and a scrub's going on, we'll go ahead and scrub it right
Mm.
there in line. So
All
I
right.
think that covers the cases. There's this other case
That's
with
great.
respect, we're scanning with resilvering, where I don't understand how to invoke that case, but that's not scrub. It's a resilver where we look at the blocks differently, but I don't think that applies.
I imagine it's pretty much the same of trying to avoid resolving the same block 20 times if it happens to dedupe 20 times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but as far as scrub goes, yeah, the unique blocks. So yeah, you can delete them
Great.
all, and
Well,
it
that sounds
shouldn't have any
great.
impact. Yeah.
Should just work.
Although I guess that raises questions about Pavel's idea of, do we want actually to keep two separate zaps or have just one big zap? Because then we need a
Well, that
different
should
mechanism to tell if DDT class contains gets replaced with DDT ref more than one or whatever. But
Yeah,
I
that
don't
seems
know
easy.
if there's some advantage to having the two that we're not realizing. I think it was Mark maybe was racking his brain trying to remember why they were separate in the first place, but I don't think he ever recalled.
Yeah, but
Okay.
isn't the class orthogonal to the like where it's stored, right? You could have two classes in one zap.
I would think so.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's just in particular, like you said, during the scan, it's just checking if it's on the duplicate list or on the unique list. And
Yeah.
from that, if we store that all in one zap, again, it was still going to have some way to tell them apart, whether it's just the ref counter or explicitly storing a class, although I don't know that that makes sense. But yeah, making sure that we don't break anything if we look at actually getting it all into one big zap.
The one difference might be that with each class in a different zap, if you want to exclude ref count one, then you just don't even do that lookup. So you never have to load that zap in. Whereas if they're all in one, you have to be reading it in. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, that's true. I would guess that with your kind of new design, the idea would be that kind of the whole DDT, all classes kind of fit into some layer of your caching, right? So hopefully, there's not that big of a the what layer of the cache it's present in wouldn't be that different for the different classes.
Yeah.
And so avoiding the second lookup would, in theory, double your performance on those kind of workloads, because you only have to look in one zap versus looking in two.
Yeah, for all writes you would. For the scrub, we might add.
Yeah,
Well,
for the scrub,
we
you wouldn't you
don't.
only have to look in one, I guess,
Yeah,
because you're just trying to determine is it in,
the
if it's
duplicate one.
in the duplicate one or not. But yeah,
But
for
like you
for
said, I think
writes
if we're
and
looking up at
freeze,
if we're looking up a hash, if it's a bigger zap, it doesn't cost us anything more to look up the one particular hash.
yeah, I mean, for writes and freeze, you have to look in both, unless you hit in the first one that you look in,
Mhm.
anyways. So,
Yeah.
reducing the number of zaps would help there.
Yeah. Other pull request we posted this week was incremental scrub. So being able to scrub just a specific transaction range and having scrub record the last transaction it did scrub. So if you do a regular scrub, it will record the transaction number when it finished, so that you can then, just scrub all blocks that changed since then. But also arbitrary ranges, so you could split a scrub up into smaller chunks, or in particular, we're looking at a case where there's a failure of a JBOD and maybe some data got damaged because of that, and we just want to scrub, 100 transactions on each side of that event, and quickly be able to tell, is the data that was born in this small time range all okay or not?
How do you specify the range?
Right now, it's just actual transaction numbers on the command line. I don't know if there's another. We'd be interested if there's other good ways of like coming up with time ranges for it or something.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't recommend doing that. Like TXG number is not something that's like exposed to users, so there might be some like hidden property or something maybe, but um, I don't like if I'm a system administrator and I'm looking at like what I have in the man pages, and then somebody says like, oh, like you can do a scrub like by specifying the TXG ranges. It's like, well, what is that? It's some new concept that doesn't really correspond to anything that I know about.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it would be better if it was either like wall clock time, or like time since, time amount of minutes in the past, or maybe based on like snapshots or something, where you could say like, I took a snapshot, then took another
Yeah,
snapshot,
a
scrub the
snapshot or a
snapshots like between
bookmark
these two
would be
snapshots. Yeah, or bookmarks.
handy way to do it, because with both of those you can just get the create TXG property as an implementation detail. Because I think for wall clock the problem is once it's off the Uber block ring, we don't know
The
the
wall
wall
clock.
clock on any old transaction groups, especially since there
Yeah.
might be billions and billions of them.
Yeah, it wouldn't be. I don't know if there would be billions, but there could be a lot. But it still might be reasonable to record those. Like you don't necessarily have to record every single TXG, but you could say like record one TXG per minute, right? Then you have like
Yep.
at most one entry per minute, and you can kind of do the math of like, well, if this pool lasts for 100 years, how big is this log going to get? And maybe then you adjust it. And you're like, not every minute. We actually need to only record it once every 15 minutes or something, right? Obviously, that's like a bunch more work for you to add those data structures and whatnot. But I feel like if it's going to be first class thing like zpool, scrub, dash, whatever, then making that as kind of easy for the sysadmin to use.
So for the kind of incremental or whatever version, it is straightforward, and you just do like zpool scrub -c for continue or whatever, and it just scrubs everything that's changed since the last scrub completed. But it does currently offer you the ability to manually specify a start and end transaction group, and maybe we can come up with a decent way of keeping time, or maybe even just a kind of a RRD style thing of, we keep a transaction group ID for each minute back so far, and then each hour, each day, each week, or whatever, so that to some degree you can do that, but in a way where, we're not going to make a zap of every 1 minute the pool's been alive or something.
So the specific case that you brought up was dealing with like a JBOD being damaged, like that. And that made me wonder if it's possible if you could integrate it in some way with like zpool events, or maybe
I think most zpool events know the transaction group that it happened at, and we were that, and just the monitoring system happens to grab the per pool TXGs case stat, where we just know the last 100 transaction groups around when the problem happened, and that was enough for their system to be able to do this. But I think a better user interface on it would be much nicer.
Well, right. So my thought was that if you could interface in some way directly with the events and specify scrub some amount of time around this event, even if the number is like, not super meaningful, like of transactions, we could have some sensible default that's like scrub 100 TXGs on either side of whatever this event was, and internally the event knows what the TXG is, and that might be a more approachable user interface for sysadmins who are just like, something bad happened to my disks, I know that there's an event associated with that, so I'll scrub around that.
Yeah, because I think every event has like an event ID, and maybe even just being able to specify that and a range or whatever. That'd be a much nicer interface for the user than this kind of implementation detail magic number that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. I mean, it's still, even with that, if the range of how many TXGs to go around that, like how do I correlate that to something that
any amount of time? Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, I don't know what number to type in there. Like, you might as well just have it be like, the default is we'll scrub like a little while around there, where we're not going to tell you how long it is. And maybe you can say like, you can do like a tiny while, a little while, or a long while. Like it gets, you can do that. It's a little hooky, and we'll just translate that to like 10 TXGs, 100 TXGs, or 1,000 TXGs, which again, we don't know like how much data was written in that time, or how much wall clock time passed. It's like very hooky. I feel like either like amount of data written or wall clock time are things that are like relevant,
much more meaningful
to sysadmins. So I would try to make it based on those. And if we can't, then, maybe this is the TXG thing is just not a first class feature. It's a tunable or something.
It's like
that's, more for, you got to call somebody who really knows something and wave your hands a lot and whatnot, versus like something that we would expect any sysadmin to be able to read the man page and understand how to use productively,
At some point, once it gets too complicated to use, it's faster to just scrub the whole system with the finished than it is to figure out the complicated interface.
Yeah. And Mav, you had an idea about using this to defer the like import verify data?
Yeah, till not so long ago, on every pull import, ZFS always scrubbed last 3 transaction groups. For metadata, it at least checked that metadata are valid, and it blocked pull import if there was any error, because it may have sense to not import pull and import previous TXG manually rather than import something we can't use. But for data, scrub was just running opportunistically, just in case it can fix anything, but pull was imported always. And to save some time, I made data scrub, I practically disabled data scrub. It's configurable now, but by default it's disabled. But I was wondering whether it can be, if we still want scrub to be done during import for data scrub, then we could use maybe this mechanism to run it asynchronously, if we don't have any other scrub running right now for just explicit request. I don't know whether we really need it that much, right? But if somebody thinks we do.
Yeah, and if it's something we've had for a while, then doing it asynchronously after import, so it's not slowing you down, but you still get the benefit of detecting anything that went wrong because of a unclean export. Right? That might be valuable.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know without knowing like
How
how
often
often
it
is
would,
that actually fixing things for people.
yeah.
I mean, in theory, it should be never, right? Like the system gets shut down uncleanly. You have the last TXG, everything, the last Uber block and everything it points to should all be committed to stable storage. But maybe you have some disks that are kind of lying to you and it's not really all committed to stable storage, but somehow your metadata all it was committed, then, I guess that would be useful to also check the user data. But like it's hard for me to say how often that would happen. It seems like it would be. I could definitely believe, disks lying about things being unstable storage or people configuring the system, so that doesn't really take effect. But you would think that like there's plenty of pieces of metadata that are still getting verified, and you would think that some of those would have been hit by that problem as well.
No, yeah, it would be good, of course, to do metadata asynchronously somehow, no, at least not to delay pull import. But as I have told, in case of metadata corruption, we may want not import.
Yeah.
Still, production would not be happy, but at least it will not be game over if we import and start updating something that we can no longer maintain.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah. I
not
mean,
certain
if your
about that.
metadata is if any piece of metadata is missing, you're going to have some kind of data loss.
Well,
So
and in particular, if you can catch it soon enough, you have a chance to still do a rewind import. But
yeah,
if you march ahead, then you obliterate that.
yep, exactly.
Unfortunately, in the case of the mentioned dedup or something like that, 3-transaction group of updates can be quite a lot of metadata, require quite a lot of head 6, so it may significantly increase pull import time. That's why I'd like to be able not to do that. Actually, speaking about pull import time and mentioned dedup log flash, I was actually thinking not about dedup log flash, but about like log
Base
metaslab,
map?
space map log. I was thinking maybe adding some flags to the pool sync or some other sub command of the pool to forcefully flush all those logs. So I was thinking about metaslab log, but it could also be applied to dedup log. Just before we're doing some HA failover or reboot or anything that we know we will soon be needed to import the pool, we first during production issue some sort of flash to write all of those, push all of those to disk, and after that, hopefully next import should go much faster. It's
Yeah,
suffice only on.
I think that for zpool sync and even zpool export would be really handy.
No, the pool export is generally more slower process because it destroys things in memory. It tries to free ARC, and just simply freeing half terabyte of ARC in 8 kilobyte blocks just takes forever.
Yeah,
we don't have that time during export. Otherwise, the pool export it actually flushes the space map log already. But question that we cannot afford full export, so it would be good just to be able to do quick and parallel, not disturbing log flush, and after that we could kill the system failover and import it faster.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea to have a function that's like, please minimize pool import time. And yeah, like zpool export would do that always. Zpool like reboot would do that always, and then also you have a manual trigger of this. Yeah, that sounds super useful.
Yeah. I saw Rob nod his head right away.
No comment, just I like it. I get
Yeah,
enthusiastic.
just brought up last week, no, this week. So nobody started yet. So if anybody wish, be my guest. Otherwise, I may do it one day.
Cool.
Great.
Other topics or questions?
Probably pretty small, if nothing else. I've noticed while looking on last block cloning crash that I may theoretically get situation when block cloning use it for file concatenation that actually FreeBSD does. You can use cat command to concatenate several files, and it's all getting mapped to block cloning by ZFS. But if you have 512 byte file and try to concatenate it to another 512 byte file, you will get file with two 512 byte blocks. That's probably not what we want. I was just wondering, is there any threshold where we would limit it? Would it be datasets record size, or we want something in between?
I would just set it. I would just say like it has to be at least the dataset's record size. Otherwise, it's still subject to growing as the file gets appended. I would say either it's a multi-block file or it is the dataset's record size. Because like you could have something where it's like, well, I changed the record size property, but I created a bunch of files before I changed the record size property, and all those files have the same record size, and so they all, like it makes sense to put them together, to splice them together, since I'm not like adding any additional restriction. Like the thing that's annoying is like I have two files that happen to be 512 bytes long, but the record size is 128K. And if I were to append to either of those files, then their record size would grow, or like the block size of the file would grow. But if I put them together, now I have a multi-block file, and it's going to be stuck with block size 512. So you just want to avoid that situation where you're taking a single block file whose record size is less, whose block size is less than the record size property, and turning it into a multi-block file with this small record size, with a small block size.
Thanks. That's what I was thinking too.
Michael Dexter is asking about how, like, I think you're asking about like how to categorize the errors from ZFS receive.
Correct. I'm now relying on native encryption, and to get it working requires some trial and error on a mix of flags and force, and it eventually worked, but the error handling is often like asking for a password once that should be a new password, but it says enter password and just fails and gives typically error 255. So I will document what I see, but it was pretty limited.
Yeah, I think that the goal with it, I don't think that we are trying to have the process exit with different numbers to indicate different kinds of failures. I think that
no
it's
surprise.
pretty much
Okay.
just like either exit 0 on success or exit 255 on failure.
Okay.
I think it uses the actual error node, doesn't it? But we have an extended set of ones for especially some newer errors about encryption that are outside the normal range, and so all map to 255 maybe. But it's a similar problem I've seen before, like, the ioctl returns, E and val for like 17 different possible errors, and then libzfs sometimes tries to guess which of those errors was more likely to even just determining what the text that will return is, because that all happens on the user space side, not in the kernel side. And I think I did a pull request a couple months ago to like change the order in libzfs of one of those, because the more likely error was never displayed. It was always saying it was some unrelated thing that was, one of 17 cases where it might return E and val.
Yeah, but I would not, I wouldn't, if it does even do any different error codes, any different process exit codes, I wouldn't try to rely on those. No. Unfortunately, like you got to parse the error messages.
And there were no messages. There was simply nothing. So that's all I
Well,
had.
that's a different problem then, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like it's just the error handling is just wrong.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is
but
the
goal is
infrastructure
that it should
likely
be
in
printing
place
help.
and it just needs to be wired up to messages, or what?
I don't know. It
Okay.
depends on the
Cool.
particular error.
Yeah, a lot of it is it selects the text of the error based on the error no the ioctl gives, but that's not a very rich interface for the number of different things that can go wrong.
Okay.
I think there's some of it we have extended and added our own error codes to be able to give more meaningful messages, but it's definitely not been plumbed through for a lot of the existing error messages. And there's a lot of just switch case guessing based on the error no. And like, oh, it got E and val. Is this value set to something? Then it means this error. Otherwise, it means this error. And it's very hit or miss.
Yeah, but not printing any message at all
That's a
sounds
bug.
like a hopefully straightforward bug.
Okay. I will try to document the behavior. It was shooting in the dark. It eventually worked, but there were sure not helpful messages like, I don't know, key not loaded or something, anything. Give me something. Anyway.
Cool. Other questions or topics? All right. Well, I hope to see you all at the conference, which is just 5 weeks from now, I think. Yeah, 5 weeks from now. We have the next call here 4 weeks from now, October 10th. I'll keep that meeting, even though it's just 1 week before the conference. I know not everybody will be able to attend the conference. So we'll have that meeting, but I understand if folks want to, skip it and if especially if they're coming to the conference, you'll get to see enough of us the next week. Look forward to that, and we'll have the talk announcements out next week. See ya.
Great. Thanks, everyone.